The Cheerleader is the second episode of the first season of The Middle, and this is directed by Shallat Chemel, and part of me wants to say that this is a very memorable episode because I could remember everything about this, and I haven't watched the show in years, but at the same time, I probably have restarted the show multiple times, so I've probably seen this episode more than I've seen most episodes, but it is absolutely fantastic and actually really emotional towards the end. So there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode and share some thoughts. It starts off with the family having dinner, they're having takeaway again, and Sue reveals she's trying for the swim team. We find out that their dryer is basically 1 second away from breaking. Axel is being punished. He has to stay within 5 feet of a parent at all times. It's a nice way to give us an insight into the current state of the family. Nobody is particularly happy, apart from Sue. Sue's very enthusiastic. And then they realise it's 2009. And we get a couple of seconds of suspense until we find out why that's significant. And then we see what I think is a brilliant advertisement for not buying things on credit to the best of a person's ability. I know sometimes buying things on credit is really invaluable if people haven't got a lot of disposable income and they really desperately need something such as a dryer. But in terms of things that are not necessities, this might help to indicate that that might not be the best idea, because we then see this brilliant montage of Frankie and Mike coming into the house with a whole bunch of gadgets and technological things and saying repeatedly, no payments until 2009. And of course, 2009 has arrived. And there's one thing that made me laugh about this. Well, several things, but one quote in particular, when Frankie pointed out, I didn't actually write the quote word for word, but it was something to the effect of, we owe $650 on a VCR that we sold at a garage sale last year for $2. I think she said $2. But that's something that I thought was pretty interesting, because buying things on credit, as I said, can be very appealing. But by the time it comes around to paying for it, you might not even have that item anymore. And that must be just the worst thing in the world, having to make payments on something you don't even have. So they realise they need to start spending a little less. So the next thing we know, they are at the Frugal Hoosier, which pops up quite a few times throughout the show. And they're having to buy non-brand food, and they're shaking cans to find peas. And then Frankie realises that she made a lot of promises to a lot of people. And this includes taking Brick to the library. And unfortunately, they're banned from the library because they owe over $100 on a book that they never returned. And I don't know if that's realistic or not. I feel like once your fine is more expensive than the cost of the book itself, it's easier to just say you lost the book and you'll just give them the money for a new book. I'm not entirely sure if that's how it works, but I would be really annoyed if I had to pay a fine for a book that I'd lost when I could have just bought them a new copy of the book. But I genuinely have recurring nightmares about overdue library books, so this definitely made me feel a little bit queasy. And then Frankie gets to work, and this is the part of the episode I remembered the most. Frankie comes up with a plan for Ehlert Motors to make more money, and she saw some cheap 50-cent bags of jelly beans down at the Frugal Hoosier. I like how everything ties together really nicely here. And they're going to fill a car with jelly beans, and whoever guesses the correct amount or the closest amount of jelly beans gets a prize. They don't get the car, but they do get a small vacation or a small trip. Meanwhile, Mike has taken Sue down to the pool for tryouts, and Sue is not good at swimming, to say the very least. And we have quite a thought-provoking exchange once they get home, where Mike had apparently told Sue she's not good at swimming, she shouldn't try out. A little bit harsh, but where Frankie says they should just completely encourage her. And it made me think, I don't know what I would want in that situation. If I was absolutely terrible at something, would I want somebody to tell me that? Or would I want to keep trying out thinking I have a chance? I don't know. I think there's benefit in hope, but maybe false hope can be damaging. I don't know. If you have any strong thoughts either way, please feel free to share. But I think it raised an interesting point that in that kind of situation, it's probably best to strike a balance. Be honest, but don't be nasty about it. But it turns out Sue needs glasses. And they go and try out some glasses, and she ends up getting some glasses, and that's a pretty interesting scene where we're back down at the Frugal Hoosier, which I rather enjoy as a location, and then we get a rather eerie scene, to be perfectly honest, where Frankie realises that Brick is such a good kid, he managed to count all of the jelly beans when they forgot to do that, that she wants to get him the library book. So she actually convinces a kid to check out the book on his own card and offers him a bag of jelly beans, which is so creepy. But to her credit, she did tell the kid that he shouldn't take candy from strangers in general. So I guess there was an important lesson there for the child. Then we have the fun with the jelly beans. We are now back down at Ehlert Motors, and somebody has won. They guessed relatively closely to the actual amount, and Frankie is about to open the car door. It's a really lovely community event because Mr. Ehlert tells all the children when the car door opens, you can collect as many jelly beans as you can, and some of the children have buckets, and it's a really nice little community event. It seemed like a really nice solution to the problems that they were having with not making enough money. And then Frankie opens the door and all of the jelly beans are stuck because it's been too warm and they've kind of melted together. A little bit awkward. Really thoroughly enjoyed it though. We then go back to the pool. Sue is trying out again. Brick is in the pool with the book and things just go from bad to worse. But then beautiful as well. We have some really strong emotions from this point onwards. Sue jumps into the pool. Brick jumps as well. The book goes flying. It ends up in the water. And then there's a tornado warning and everything for Frankie is just going from bad to worse. And they're in the house sheltering from the tornado and Sue asks her mother, are we going to be okay? And Frankie replies, I don't know. And what we have next is this brilliant performance. I've mentioned this many times. Patricia Heaton is amazing. But it's this performance of a mother who has tried so hard to keep everything together for her family, to pretend that everything is going to be okay. They owe a lot of money. It's okay. They'll eat at the frugal Hoosier. She's worried about getting fired from her job. It's okay. They'll find a way to get through it. Her daughter never makes any of the teams she tries out for. It's okay. Keep her spirits raised. Frankie is very much the glue that holds the family together in this show altogether. And there have just been too many bad things, one after another. She finally snaps. And here we have a display of a mother who has tried so hard to keep her family feeling positive that it's become too much. And she's kept too many of her feelings encased inside of her and they all just unleash at once. And it feels very genuine. It feels very realistic and believable. And it's a very powerful performance. And the expressions on the faces of Mike, Sue, Axel, and Brick are just incredible. They really show that this is not the typical behaviour from Frankie. And I think, well, I hope that it helps to indicate that, yes, it's good to keep your family positive, but sometimes that can almost be damaging to your own mental health. If you keep things bottled up and you don't face the reality of the situation, as Frankie hasn't been, she's just been saying, it's fine, we'll get through it. It can have a really negative impact. And as we see with Frankie, it just all became too much. And it's a really powerful performance. And then, and I got a little emotional at this point, Mike just turns to her and says, Frankie, we'll get through. And it was just beautiful because in that moment, the tables were turned. And Mike was, as the title suggests, the cheerleader. He's the one now who is supporting the family because the person who usually does it can't do it anymore. And it was very, very well done and I was very impressed. The tornado is over. They go outside. Frankie is currently giving this beautiful speech about how if you have your family, you've got everything, you're there for each other. And then she cuts herself off and says, holy crap, is that a dryer? The tornado had brought them a dryer. And the moral there is that if you don't give up hope, if you keep going, if you focus on what's important, e.g. family, you'll get through it and you never know what's around the corner. And in this case, around the corner was a dryer they desperately needed. I would argue nobody desperately needs a dryer. I've gone my entire life without having a dryer. But nevertheless, this is something that they apparently can't live without. Apparently they can't air dry their clothes. So never mind. It is still very entertaining, really beautiful, very funny a lot of the time, but also emotional and very moving. And as I said, I remember this one very, very well. Yes, probably because I've seen it more than most episodes, but also because I just think the cheerleader is pretty fantastic.